Hello everyone, and welcome back to the channel. In this episode, I dive into a very interesting question. Why are most artists against competition? I know I was. I kind of still am. My mind wanders as it will, and when it does, I find myself on the internet looking for answers, or maybe just another individual who may be going through similar circumstances. So stick around and let's dive into this. My name is Jeff Mohr. I'm the Northwoods Carver, and thanks for seeing what I saw. So there's a lot to unpack here, so let's just go right for the center mass. There are a lot of articles out there that I've read. This one here is pretty interesting. It's on Reddit. An artistic lounge. It's about a year ago. It took place, this thing was written by Elignated Musk, and it goes something like this. Question is, why are most artists against competition? And this person says, I personally feel that I strive to better my skill by looking at other artists, and my instincts will tell me to get better. I don't try to be egotistical about it. I just view it like fighting. I compare technical skills and look at what they did and see if I can do it better or incorporate it to my style. I feel like this may be controversial, but I stay humble, but I get excited comparing myself personally. That's why I got so far. Comparing myself against myself is boring. I evaluate myself and see where I went wrong. I feel like being competitive is frowned upon, and I don't blame you. I just want to share my thoughts. I was surprised this got so much attention. I'm glad I got to hear your guys' opinions. It's interesting to read your comments. Apologies if I come out egotistical. I'm not. All right, so there we go. So in a nutshell, this person looks like they're trying to say that they are, they need other people. They need to see other people's works to improve theirs. And I get it, totally get it. And I think we're all like that. It's just sometimes people just think that they just originated something when they actually did not. But the only way they can learn is by copying what somebody else has done, because we live in a finite world, believe it or not. We only have so many, are the animals around us, our history, everything is like kind of set. Like trees look a certain way, blah, blah, blah. You can incorporate this and that. Has it been done before? Maybe, maybe not, but I digress. Let's get after it. So here are some of the comments. Now, some of these comments that I'm going to read, I do not agree with whatsoever. This is not my opinion whatsoever at all, nor has it ever been. Some of them are right on with my way of thinking, but that's not why I'm doing this. This is just answers to this person's questions on Reddit. All right. This is why, for me, I'm tired of competing. Let's just enjoy the cool things we can make in a supportive and mutually creative space. That is pretty much how I was kind of raised with this person's outlook. I always felt like, when it comes to children, like, which one do you like best? Well, they're all awesome, but you got to pick one. It's like, well, I don't want to pick one. Well, you're going to need to, and here's your criteria for it. Okay, fine. So that is why, for those of you that don't know, I judge the U.S. Open. It's a chainsaw carving event. It's a pretty big one in Eau Claire, Wisconsin. I've done it for 6 years, and it's been life-changing for me. The reason why I took that job was because I thought, I had an opportunity to carve there in the competition. I could have just been a guest carver. I could have just judged, whatever. But I just decided to become a judge. And the reason why is because I was judged and I didn't like the outcome. So I thought, well, you know what? I didn't, it wasn't that I didn't accept the outcome. I didn't like it because some of the judges were not really qualified, in my opinion. So what we need to do is find ourselves some humility. Like, not just, I'm speaking for myself. I needed to find humility in learning how to be a judge, and also seeing their side of the story. It's like a self-help mechanism that I have to go through something that is uncomfortable, something that I've always had a problem with, and then become the thing that I despise. That's all I can say. I become the thing I despise. So I have to get in the shoes of the judge. And, we worked on the criteria, myself and the people over there, the heads of that part of the competition. And we just basically recreated the criteria so that it was easy for anybody to just understand it. So we just took off, and every year it's been more and more enlightening and more difficult where I think why I make a good judge is because I have almost 35 years of high-end carving experience. Well, of course, not in the middle, not even in the beginning, but like probably the last 10 years I've been doing my best work. So, and I'm pretty well known throughout the carving world, just because of Facebook. I mean, if it wasn't for Facebook, no one would know. No one would know who I was, and if it wasn't for YouTube, no one would know who I was. So I have had the ability to travel around and carve with the best carvers in the world. Way better than me, in my opinion. Just amazing. And those are the people, unfortunately, that I have to judge because they are competitors. And who better to give them a fair shake than someone else who is, well-known or relatively well-known with a relatively high set of skills to address them, instead of somebody who has no idea what they're doing or has very little idea of how things are done at a high level. So that is my niche. I'm also reluctant to do so. I'm not there for an ego boost. I'm there to do my job, and struggle with it as I may. There's 3 other judges there that are doing the same as me. They're trying their best, and we all discuss, and it's very, very difficult. And when we do finally crunch numbers and have discussions, it's usually the outcome doesn't matter. I mean, I feel good about it, but always there's like this little twinge of, man, what if they would have just done this or just a little bit more there? It could have edged them out or whatever. So being a judge is difficult and rewarding at the same time. So it does have a tendency, to weed out individuals also that are more ego-driven, and it makes it easy to find them, spot them, and remove them from the competition or from future competitions. And it's not a pretty sight. Unfortunately, we've had to do it in the past, and who knows, we'll probably have to do it in the future. But it's one of those things where we just want everyone to get along, and really, if you've ever been to one of these things, try the US Open, because it's a competition, but everybody loves each other, everybody helps each other. They're just there to carve together, and then a couple of yahoos with pens and paper go through there and tell everyone what they don't want to hear at the end. So, well, there'll be 2 or 3 people that want to hear it, but the rest of them don't, and that's my take. So let's move on. And this person says, I find this especially true in a time and age where so much of our time is spent online. It's one thing if you see a new artist every few months and get inspired. That's cool. It's another thing to see hundreds, if not thousands, of artists posting their work that they've especially or specialized in entirely different fields. And to always see the top creators in the entertainment industry on a daily basis to be on ArtStation, Instagram, whatever platform where there's so much work for industry professionals who have been at it for 20, 30, 40 years, and to see animators, modelers, background painters, characters, designers, Western styles, Eastern styles, storyboard artists all at once. You can't compete with every person in everything. At some point, you have to focus on yourself and your own journey. Comparison can be healthy to some degree, but you have to be able to look at something and appreciate them without necessarily applying them to what you're doing. I love it. Well said. Here's another. There are people who tear other artists down by building themselves up, and artists who mentally destroy themselves by comparing themselves to others. That's the competition that is frowned upon. Everyone has their own audience, so direct competition like that doesn't make sense, like it might in another field. But healthy competitiveness, to keep wanting to be better and inspired to work harder by peers in your field, is completely different and definitely encouraged. Boy, you're gonna hear different ends of the spectrum here. I love that. I mean, and it depends on where you are psychologically, physically, whatever. If you got thicker skin, and if you're not ego driven, you'll be fine. You'll be fine, because when you're, I think most of us want to hide in a shell. And when we go to compete, we're just like, oh, I'm gonna win and they're not gonna like it, or I'm gonna lose and I'm not gonna like it. And then you get an attitude, and it's the positive mindset is important when you're an artist, especially if you're gonna compete. So you're gonna find that other artists that are just as compassionate, if not more compassionate than you. And it's real easy to deal with those types of people. Here's another one. Shivik. People are not against competitiveness. People are against obsessive competitiveness. That is when people compare themselves and their art to others too much and start hating themselves and their art. Yeah, I think it's a personality thing. Seriously, like if you're a glass is half empty or a glass is half full type of person, or maybe art is sacred to you and you keep it in a closet, like it just means everything to you, but you really don't get to share it with anyone. And then you grow up and you grow into this new world where everything's online. Everybody is a critic, right? So, it can be, I guess, pretty raw at times for those types of people. But if you don't show anybody, guess what? You're all right. No harm, no foul. Ryu 2198. Now I'm going to remind you, this is a year ago. So this person says, art is more like golf in that it is a competition with one's own self and at times a mixed martial arts fight with the ego. Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner. And that is the thing. So when it comes to competitiveness, if you don't have you have to have an ego. An ego supports the killer instinct, basically. Not that we need a killer instinct in art, but in competitiveness, I think it's important. You have to have something that tells you that you're good enough to compete anyway. And then once you compete, say you're just entering a competition, and you get your keister handed to you in a thimble, and you're just like, it's very humbling, and then you go home and lick your wounds for a while, and then you come back a better person, better artist. And that's actually happened to me. I'll go into that later. All right, so not to mention, unlike golf and MMA, there isn't really a way to objectively be better than someone else. You could get anatomy down to a T. Some people will still think Picasso's Cubist portraits are better than your anatomically correct ones. Perspective, that's all I gotta say. You could try to become more skilled than the other artists, but that doesn't mean your landscaping painting will be more valuable than a Jackson Pollock original. There are a bunch of different styles and techniques to approach solving creative problems, and not a single one of them is objectively better than the other. That's my observation anyway. Maybe artists are more receptive to short burst competitions. Like, let's do a 24-hour comic challenge where you, as a group or an individual, literally have the next 24 hours to create a comic from scratch to finished product. So obviously this is an illustrator of some sort. This is not necessarily, I have chainsaw carving friends, lots of them, and some of them might be listening, but this is for artists in general. So it covers everything in one big swath. So yeah, I think the competitive edge is, okay, so there's different ways to utilize your skill set, and how do you utilize your time, and how smooth are you? How can you manage your time well and be efficient with the tools and the size of the piece that you want to do? And there's a lot of experience that comes in, and the person that nails that perfectly might not win. Because there might be 3 or 4 or 5 people that are doing the same thing. Just some might be a little better at that specific quality. So let's move on to the next. Are you a very experienced artist? I don't just mean can you draw, paint, etc. Well, your perception seems very inexperienced and skewed. A few things that make me think this fighting technical skill style and, the subject of the post competitive all jump out at me. And so this person is kind of offended, I guess, that he used a fighting reference. But I honestly think that it's pretty spot on, in my opinion. Of course, it's just me. And this person is a genius for saying this, and it's beautiful, and I agree 100%. Comparison is the thief of joy. Competing against myself is already enough of an uphill battle. Why add others into the mix? Also, unless you're trying to get into a very intense job market, most make art for joy, not to outcompete others. I think that's a Fantasyland comment. Honestly, the first part was brilliant, but we make art for a living, and we have to compete against each other, and we have to outdo each other in a competitive way in the market. You just kind of want to separate yourself from the people around you. If they're doing Like in my business, I'm a wood carver, chainsaw carver. I have to do something different than the other people. And I have my own style, and I kind of mastered the art of doing as little as possible for as much money as I can get. But you have to have a product or a piece of art that is deemed worthy of that kind of reciprocation from your customer, right? So they have to know and believe that you're worth it, and that's critical. Now, moving on. Jerichoa says, I can't speak for most artists, but anytime I see a competition, it has some prize like, we'll put your art on a site, or something like that. To me, this reads a competition to make free art for our website. And I've seen it done. I see it done still today. And basically that's just what it is. That's just what the world we live in, unfortunately. Or fortunately, depending on which side of that coin you're on. Certainly, there are a myriad of contests that just want to show good work. But some have a skeezy motive, i.e. Instagram brand ambassadors. I'm not aware. I don't do the Instagram thing, I don't think. Do I? I don't even know. I have to look. Anyway, another point, lots of artists have inherent inferiority complexes. That's a fact. We strive to create artwork on par with our heroes, but in pursuit of this goal, we call ourselves garbage for making something different than our goals. We fail to develop a meaningful message or style because we want to emulate the appeal of the canon. Now that is interesting, but I talk about this in my classes. If you're interested, you can look me up for the Carver's Cambium workshops. And one of the things is between you and the thing that you want to accomplish is a whole lot of fingerprints. And guess whose they are? They're yours. So you have a fingerprint, and no matter how hard you try sometimes to make yourself emulate something perfectly, it's just never going to work out. And a lot of times, realizing the struggle is real, you'll realize that in the meantime, you have created something that's your own. Just lets you know, hey, I tried. And I think what it is, it's lack of skill that makes the fingerprint stand out more. So if you're shooting high, right, and you're trying to get to a certain point, and you want to say carve a bear or whatever, like this guy, and you end up finding a totally different style that you're totally happy with, and it takes people by storm, and you're just like, man, this is great. Don't stop there. Just keep trucking, but capitalize on those moments and sell your mistakes. That's all I'm saying. Sell your mistakes. All right, that's what we do as artists. We sell our mistakes because everything is a mistake. The day you find the perfect piece, or you've done the perfect piece, you can retire or just go find some other art form you can screw up. That's what I do. All right, in the context of the art competitions, there is an inherent pressure to focus towards mainstream sensibilities, and judges are under pressure to select works of the greatest universal appeal and not necessarily the most technically skillful or creatively ambitious. In the context of art competitions, there is an inherent pressure to focus towards mainstream sensibilities, and judges are under pressure to select works of the greatest universal appeal and not necessarily the most technically skillful or creative ambitious. Many otherwise magnificent revolutionaries are sidelined by accessible, emotionless corporate art, so that the competition isn't an art competition, it's a corporate design competition, and many would-be brilliant creators are steered towards a culture of corporate mediocrity. The simplest way to say it is, comparison is the enemy of happiness. And I like that art makes me happy. And that was Jerichoa. So here's the only thing I have to say about that in a nutshell. You usually have multiple judges. There's not just one judge. You have, as a judge, you have to look at the criteria. And in that criteria, you'll have a window, like say 1 through 7 or 1 through 10. And you have to score that person somewhere in that radius of, that the parallel of 1 through 10, and then you have little boxes, and then you say, okay, was this person's creativity great? Yes. Was his wow factor great? But how? Okay, so where on the scale does it fall compared to the others? And then you have to mark that. In your just what I see against the others. Now, it doesn't mean that I haven't seen a bear carving before. It doesn't mean I haven't seen a fish or a crab or a mermaid. It has nothing to do with that. It's just where we see those things. Has it been done before? We don't even think about that. I mean, we're just looking at what's in front of us. What is in front of us? Because everyone has pretty much carved everything at some point. And it's just the way they come at the project. So somebody might pick, I don't know, like a wildlife theme and do like an origami style, which is totally wicked and very unique. But are the animals and trees and rocks unique? Nope. We all get to see them. It's just how he puts the vision, or she puts the vision, into reality. That is an original for that competition. It doesn't make that necessarily original. It's just how he executed it and all the work that it took to do so. So he gets high marks on that, right? Or she gets high marks. Now, if we do, there's, like I said, and then you have 4 judges. Those judges are going to have different opinions on where that falls in originality or wow factor or composition. And so things get squirrely. So just to say, I mean, you can tell when people judge something. If they've ever judged anything, they wouldn't be saying the things like the judges are under pressure to select works of greatest universal appeal. That's called people's choice in the realm that I live in. So the people can say people's choice, right? They get an award for people's choice. And then the judges will have their choice for the highest score or the lowest score, depending on which way it goes. And then you have the carver's choice or the artist's choice. And then the group that is in the competition will pick their favorite. And there you have it. So there's so many ways to thread through those egotistical, opinionated comments. Not that this is, but saying that somebody shouldn't have won because they did something somebody else did 4 years ago is irrelevant. It's completely irrelevant, because how many fish were carved in carving contests across the world. But somebody, the guy that carved the first one cannot claim anything. I carved a fish, I carved a salmon, I carved a shark, I carved a whale, I carved a bear and a whale, I carved a lady in a tree with a bird. There's just like a million things to do. And where do we get those ideas from? Illustrations from times long ago. It just fuels our artistic mind. Just take a look on Pinterest sometime. All the crazy cool illustrations there. I mean, I feed off of that. I might even borrow some of those concepts. So is that original? No. Is how I put it out there? Yes, it is. So, that being said, we'll move on. So I will say this though, when as a judge, I think all of us have to face it. We have to look at where. So there's these motions that like these revolutions that take place in the carving world, and it's really interesting because certain types of things that are perfectly acceptable and doable within a certain time frame. And so, of course, future carvers coming up into that, or future artists coming into that scene, are going to emulate that style because it's doable in that time constraint. And so there's also so many ways you can carve a large animal into a medium-sized log or even a large log. I mean, there's a lot of work that goes into that, right? You have to join. There's a lot of joinery. You have to, laminate, and there's just only so much time, and you need to spend it carving and finishing. All the extra stuff, well, that goes without saying. That's gonna cost you. So, in that regard, we find ourselves looking at somewhat similar, not styles, but the fundamental style of getting this, image out there. Some people are very soulful in their approach to that, and other people are just very matter of fact. And here is a fish, and here is a bear, but there's no story. So we have to judge that as well. So, but I'm looking at a lot of these carvings that are just really cool, but very doable in a 3-day stretch. And I think that limits the potential for real creativity and artistic ability to, have an real original thoughts, because there's just, you have to stay within your wheelhouse and you have to execute quickly and efficiently. And I think that's why we see all the stuff that we see. And every once in a while, somebody will truly step out of the box and freak us out. And I see it all the time. And guess what? They don't always win, unfortunately, because originality, well, that's only one part of the score. And you got 4 judges scoring everything differently. So that's why I'm saying it's just the way it is, unfortunately. All right. So Between Sky and Sea writes, my thoughts. In this post, you discuss artists who are better than you. But in your other posts, you mention artists you feel are worse than you. Apparently, this person knows this other person who's posting. It's like, grab your popcorn, people. So here we go. Some people use comparison as an excuse to start giving out unsolicited critiques. Hey, look, I'm so much smarter than you, and that I can find 17 places for you to improve. This is bad. Don't tear others down to make yourself feel taller. And that is, I don't care if the person's really close to you or not. And next time, if you're in a situation like that, wait for them to ask for your critique, or just say, hey, would you like my opinion on it? I mean, because if you come at them, both guns blazing, yeah, that's a turnoff. That's a bad thing. People want to be told the truth. Some people can take it and other people just can't. And I think there's there's this weirdness when someone says, go ahead, man, hit me, I can take it. I'm like, well, I'm not that kind of guy. I'm not going to just, lambaste you with all this stuff. I'm not a mean person, and I'm a nurturer. So I'm not going to hit you with a cannon when all it takes is a pencil and paper. It doesn't make sense. So that's just how I roll. Some people use comparison as an opportunity for self-reflection. Compared to this younger artist, I am a few steps ahead on my art journey. How did I get here? And what are the things I learned on the way? And if the other person, if looking for advice, what one key observation or exercise may help? Since everyone's journey is a little different, I try to think about how the other person got to where they are and where they're going. Empathy is more useful than a sense of superiority. Some people use comparisons as an opportunity for self-reflection. Compared to this younger artist, I am a few steps ahead in my art journey. How did I get here? And what were the things I learned along the way? And if the other person, what one key observation or exercise might help? Since everyone's journey is a little different, I try to think about how the other person's got to where they are and where they're going. Empathy is more useful than a sense of superiority. From the other perspective, what do you do when you notice an artist who's better than you? I see it all the time. What do? I just drink my water and go back to my work. What am I supposed to say? Some people find comparison to experienced artists extremely disheartening. I'll never be as good as them. I'll never be as good as them. To tell them comparison is not a good strategy mental health-wise and creating an isolation, some people find comparison to experienced artists extremely disheartening. I'll never be as good as them. To them, comparison is not a good strategy, mental health wise, and creating an isolation with limited contact with other artists is more fruitful. That's, they're out there. They're out there in droves, people like that. Some people find comparison inspiring. Oh, I didn't even know that was possible. That composition, color scheme, visual language was possible. I didn't know any of this was possible. Now I want to try it. Others use comparisons to evaluate industry readiness. Okay, here's what a professional artwork in this field looks like. What skills do I need to hone to make my artwork look like this? So that's a whole nother level. That's when you are trying to meet a standard for industry instead of just winging it, understanding dimensions and footprint and, style. It's so much different than just creating something and just throwing it out there, putting it up for sale. The standard in the industry needs to be maintained, and occasionally you can buck it, but pretty much they just want you to fall into place. You know what I'm saying? On one hand, I totally understand this sentiment, especially as regards to the past 2 points. I'm very driven by the need to explore, to prove that I can do anything I set my mind to. Oh, a technique I've never heard before? I'm trying it. How did they do that? I won't give up until I can do it myself. On the other hand, it's good to surround oneself with fellow artists who are less like competitors and more like peers. We're all running a marathon together. On one day, I might do my best to help a fellow artist. The next, that same artist might turn around and try to help me. We're all a support network for each other, providing critique, encouragement, and connections. As with anything, comparison is a tool. It can be used for good in productive ways and bad, unproductive ways. That was Between the Sky and Sea. All right, albino, Exelot. For Pete's sake, art is not a damn sport. Good enough. I get it. Right on. All right, toxic cauliflower. Oh, art is subjective, so improving by someone else's standard shouldn't even be the goal. If your art is personal, it becomes more meaningful. I'm going to touch on that. I wasn't going to, but I'm going to. I can't help myself. All right, so art is subjective, so improving someone else's standard should be the goal. If your art is personal, it becomes more meaningful. Yes, it is true. But if you're an artist and you're a professional, you need to sell that artwork. And you also need to be capable of producing artwork that you can sell, not just meaningful stuff. I mean, we're talking about someone that isn't competing, someone who isn't selling their art, someone who's just creating for the fun of creation, which is awesome. But in the real world, if you're going to be an artist, you have to wake up, smell the coffee, and get to work on figuring out how you're going to do that. And the best way is to just get out there and figure it out. Find other people that do it and be competitive that way, because you have to. It's business. You know, you got to make your work so good and so efficient that it sells itself. Or people are like, oh man, I just got to have that. I was like, well, you sure? You don't want to be saying that kind of stuff. You know, tell them a story. Tell them whatever you want. This is art. Sometimes there is an actual story that goes with it, and other times you're just trying to pull heartstrings and create a piece that people will remember. It might not have much to do with any part of your own past, but you might get those fragmented ideas from the story that person told you, or that a person's told you. Or maybe you have a storybook type of mind and you can easily tell a story in a short period of time that is impactful, and then you can use those tools to create your work, and it'll give it a little extra something that people just can't put their finger on, but they've got to have it. All right, here we are. Rumi14 says, because art, unlike sports, is not really comparable. Each piece is an expression of a unique person. How do we compare it? Well, let me just put it like this. It's very comparable in a genre. Like, who executed this better? Who executed that better? Well, that's all up for grabs, right? Everybody's got a different opinion. A lot of art, things that you think are art, or just somebody's creation. It really wasn't, it's art when you decide it's art. And that, I did a video on it back, a couple months ago about what is art. And it goes into that, but check it out. All right, so zombie dragons. Because you can't win at art. Everyone has a completely different way of expressing their ideas, and that's not something you can compete with. Sure, you can look at anatomically correct artworks and say that some are more realistic than others, but art is more than that. It is. He's right on. And you can't win. All you can do is your best, right? Guess what? You can't win unless you compete. You can't sell it unless you carve it. And if you put your pieces amongst other pieces, yes, you can win. I hate to say it. I hate to break it to you. You can win in art. If you stay on the outside and never compete and never put your stuff against anybody else's, then that would be, it's a big win because you never competed. It's very interesting how that works out. This is only a problem. This is from Space Chalk 64. This is only a problem when it robs you of joy and drive. People compare themselves to other artists and then despair because they aren't as good. That isn't healthy, as per the hundreds of posts on this sub about this exact thing. Looking at another's artwork you admire or find appealing and trying to reverse engineer it, how they did something or solved the problem or used a particular technique, which sounds like what you are doing, is a great thing and can lead to a lot of personal growth. All right, so there is a lot of personal growth that can be, how else do you grow? You need to have, you have to absorb it from somewhere. We're not all self-contained units. We have to absorb things, ideas, emotions, and we can go a long ways doing so. And once you master the tools and the techniques, all the other stuff is just, you can pretty much bend and twist your compositions any way you want, because now you have this wealth of experience. Just like writing, they say you can't be a good writer if you've never done anything. You know what I mean? You can't just write about things you heard. You gotta go out there and do it and really experience it. All right, Dry K 9510. It's about the mindset. A lot of artists spiral into negative mindset art block, hating their own art from comparing themselves to other artists, hindering their progress. But this doesn't have to happen to everyone. So if it works for you, then that's great. Perhaps it depends on the artist's personality. 100%. Personally, I find seeing other artists as a source of inspiration to improve rather than thinking of it as a competition helps a lot. Being a perfectionist, it's very easy to overlook the journey when I'm only focusing on the result, which limits spontaneity, creativity, and art is all about the journey. I think this might be what you're talking about. Correct me if I'm wrong, your mindset is more about expanding your artistic capabilities by seeking aspiration from other great artists rather than this artist is better than me. I must become like or better than them because I don't like my current state of the art that I'm making. Improvement takes a while, and with that mindset, it's very likely to burn out quickly. And then Allignated Musk says, but if they are better than me, then that makes me want to be better because I don't know pride and stuff. It worked for me, and I feel like I may have a controversial take. It doesn't sound like it to me. Controversial take? I don't think so. So, what better way to inspire oneself than to get out there and see what others have done and see the levels at which it can be done to inspire you to go on your own and do your own thing. Well, it's a wrap, everyone. I think we've covered enough bases, and I got it out of my system. What can I say? Stay tuned, and we'll see you on the next one.